Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Bryant Francis. Today, we're doing it. We're talking about AI. You heard me say a few times in this podcast that AI is something of a black hole when it comes to conversations. Generative AI, diffusion-based AI, LLMs, frontier models, the shocking amount of impact they've had on society and game development means it's so easy for any topic to turn towards this technology. But AI, especially in video games, is about far more than chatbots and shrimp Jesus simulators. It's about simulationism, NPC behavior, online matchmaking, and so much more. And as so many executives push for expanded use of AI technology in games, industry experts like David Rez Graham and Luke Dicken have had to watch all discussion of their entire field of expertise get pulled back toward the event horizon by that crushing stellar object. Today, I'm super excited to have Graham and Dicken on the Game Developer Podcast for a conversation about generative AI, but it's a lot more than that. It's about understanding how we work together, what purpose computer automation serves in any work environment, and let me check my notes. Invader Zim's beloved robot Gur? Anyway, see you on the other side. And Rez and Luke, thank you for coming on the Game Developer Podcast. It's so great to have you here today.
Thanks for having us.
I'm sure that feels totally natural, given that we were just talking for like 10 minutes, and now here I am acting like you just walked in the room. But let's get things off with a fun question. Like, look, we're here to talk about AI, which in games is awesome, right? We have Alien Isolation, we have the stuff powering, like The Sims and SimCity, the stuff that powers huge open worlds, the stuff that powers like the director in the Left 4 Dead games. But also lately it's turned into a weird conversation. So before we do any of that, let's take a step back, and I want to hear from each of you. In media, books, films, audio drama, whatever, what is one of your favorite appearances of an AI? It can be an AI character. It can be an AI program that's not a character, because that's a thing. What is for each of you like a very beloved AI thing out there in media that you really enjoy? It can be for good or bad reasons.
I'm going to jump in before Rez says anything, because I want to get my answer out first. Gur is amazing as AI, because it's a reminder, for me at least, that AI doesn't have to be smart, right? Things are AI when they are real dumb as well. Like it's been part of shaping how I think about intelligence generally.
And that's Gur from Invader Zim, right?
It's Gur from Invader. Sorry, I'm pointing at my little.
Oh yeah.
It's one of them. I have a line of them here. I have my game dev Barbie. I have Gur, and they're all kind of totems to things that I think about.
Yeah, Gur is absolutely. I mean, Gur's iconic, and you gave good reasons. Rez, you, an AI character or an AI non-character in a thing? What jumps to mind for you?
Yeah, I would have to go with. This is going to be a real obscure reference. There's a book series called Starship's Mage, and they have a depiction of an AI in there, and the fifth or sixth book or something. Similar, or like the AI from Dungeon Crawler Carl, right? The dungeon AI. And the reason why I like those types of views of AI is because they are so incredibly not human. And I think that is the folly of what a lot of people have with AI is because it sort of sounds like a human, they attribute human qualities to it. And when Damian Montgomery, one of the main characters of the Starship's Mage series, the first thing he's told is it's not human. Like, it's going to be weird. And I really like that aspect of it. It's like, it's nothing like us.
Yeah.
It might sound like us in user language, but nothing like us.
I'm going to give my own answer here, which is the first one that I was actually racking my own brain over this question for myself before I asked it. And I don't know. My answer for the next hour is going to be Legion from Mass Effects 2 and 3. I don't know if the Mass Effect games I don't know if those are necessarily good stories about like the crossing the line from biological intelligence to machine intelligence. I don't know if they're actually good about that. But Legion as a character assembled from like a collective consciousness and where that goes in the story of Mass Effect is such a cool character. Like, I think like if there was a flaw in like measuring it as a story about AI, is that I don't think there's anything necessarily machine about his machine, their machine, theirs, its machine intelligence. But like the line, "Does this unit have a soul?" is just ripped so hard that like, and what the BioWare team, what those writers and designers and what they all pulled off with that end of the world and the characters, like Legion, just like, I'm just like, man, you rule, dude. Like, I want to hang out with you, even though you might end my entire civilization. Speaking of AI that could end civilizations, actually, no, we're not going to talk about that because that's the catch. I've lured my viewers in for a chat with two game AI experts who have been working in this field so long that like, you were talking about AI in games before it was cool, question mark. So the first question I want to bring to you two today is kind of about that, which is you both work in the field of AI in video games. You've both like had an input in some incredible like projects in your time, things that have helped people out, a lot of fun. What has it been like for each of you to see this sudden interest in AI in games, air quotes, but to have it sort of like not be what you do, but also not be what you do, right? Like, well, for what each of you, was it just been like emotionally as like people being in games, I guess?
Well, so that's probably the next hour.
Yeah. So the way that I've been talking about it is like, I have stood on stage at GDC and ranted and raved about, literally in the AI rant session, about it can be more than making the bad guy shoot back. And somebody in that room had a monkey's paw that and yeah, I mean it's been hard, and a lot of I'm doing because I'm kind of between things right now. I'm doing a lot of soul searching on the one hand, and like kind of conversations and articles trying to make the distinction between Gen AI and game AI, but also kind of thinking about my identity, because I mean I don't know how you feel about it, Rez, but like I've identified as the game AI guy for the best part of 15 years at this point. And for me, there's an old line. In fact, I think, Rez, you might have been who told me this line. How do you tell if something's AI or computer science? Well, if it works, it's computer science. And if it doesn't work yet, and that was true 5 years ago. Like, and when we said AI in games, like, I think one of the things that I've had to kind of reconcile with is like, it was never about the technology for me. It was always about innovation. It was about trying to harness something to figure out what it could do and push the boundaries of the medium. And like AI was a shorthand against that because it always was on the forefront and out there, and kind of it didn't quite work yet and we were trying to figure it out. Whatever's happening right now is a lot of not that. And like that's where for me I'm having to recontextualize a lot of like my professional identity as maybe I'm not the AI guy. Maybe I'm the innovation guy.
Rez, how about you? What is your emotional experience in here, I guess?
God, it's been a roller coaster. Yeah. So similar to Luke, I mean, I've been the AI expert and so on, trying to get believable behavior. I've also stood up on that stage and said, we need more procedural content in games. We need to put more AI in the tools, etc. What was it? 2 years ago now, I guess, gave a talk, which is, I think, free on the Vault now, which is the human cost of generative AI, which sums up a lot of my thoughts on where we're at and where we're going. My issues with AI, similar to what Luke was saying, so as part of my other series of things that I do, I'm a magician. And you get kind of two types of magicians. You get magicians who are like, oh, I want to do the move and I want to get perfect at that. And you have the kind of magician where I don't care what any of that is. I want to give the audience an experience. And so I agree that it's, to me, someone said this at GDC at one of my first conferences in one of the AI roundtables or something. He's like, I don't need it to be perfect. I need it to be fun and run in 60 frames a second.
Yeah.
I don't know that the current state of generative AI is either fun or runs in 60 frames a second. So that's one issue. But here's where I fall apart a little bit is I'm watching friends, colleagues, family members have their work stolen to train AIs to replace them. I'm watching that happen right now. I'm watching my partner struggle to find work in animation because animation was hit pretty hard with this. I'm watching my friends and colleagues get made redundant and all that stuff. And I'm not, this is not about, oh, they're taking our jobs. It's about what we're doing is we're replacing the artistic soul of things with derivation. I mean, this derivative sort of thing. AI is not creative. It can't be creative. It can connect to things that you might not notice, but it is derivative by definition. It merges things together. It's fancy autocomplete. And we forget that because it creates, a picture of shrimp Jesus or whatever that is scrolling on Facebook, right? And so we forget those things. So for me, there's a part of me that's like, oh shit, this is really cool. There's something we can do here. What if we, what if the NPCs no longer have their 3 lines of canned dialogue? What if we can have 1,000 endless lines of dialogue, all that kind of stuff? And then the other side of me is like, oh, but also like they're stealing from my friends, family, colleagues, and myself. I'm part of the Anthropic thing because they took from one of my books, and
but I think
it's hard, right?
Yeah.
This is not the thing, right? Because whenever we touch on AI, I think Rez and I, and it's part of like the emotional journey of navigating this moment. Which of the 5 conversations about AI are we having in this moment? And I often find. So I was talking to a close friend, a guy who's used to run the engineering group under me at Take Two, and we're talking about AI, and I'm talking about or at least I think I'm talking about like the big tech hype elements. And eventually he was like, "Well, LLMs are not going anywhere," and I'm like, "LLMs are math. Nobody's going to wave a magic wand and suddenly the math doesn't exist." But which part of the conversation are we having? Because there are about 5, and you think you're arguing, you're having one, and you end up, that is such a hard thing to navigate when you can have any one of those 5.
AI is such an overloaded term right now. I totally agree. Even if I say, I actually was just talking to a student who had, I was looking at their resume and they had AI, they had an interest in AI, and I'm like, at this point, you have to be more specific. Are we talking AI like utility theory, behavior trees, state machines? Are we talking AI like planners? Are we talking AI like animation? Is it basically you want to be the pathfinding guy? Do you want to get into LLMs? And what version of LLMs are we talking about? What are we doing? So I don't know I don't even know what I am anymore. Am I a behaviorist now? What am I?
And that overloaded obfuscation is also the pace that the big tech hype cycle moves at means you can't actually nail it down, because 2 weeks from now there's going to be a whole new buzzword that they've coined and a whole new set of things. By the way, the buzzword that they've coined is probably something from the 70s that they've recycled. But it's hard out there to even have a conversation about this for exactly those reasons.
Yeah. And it's hard for you two as experts because you have and I'm not just saying this to put you on a pedestal or anything. Look, if you want a pedestal, perhaps you each have one in your own home if you want to use that for yourself. But I was gonna say, as a writer who has to write about this for work, right? I've had to lean back on the word generative AI to try and make clear when I'm talking about, like you said, pathfinding versus stuff like from Left 4 Dead 2. But then I've actually talked with AI people who wince a little when they say that, and I'm like, what? And they're like, well, you're right when you're talking about LLMs and such, but diffusion AI behind images is not generative. That's a different technique. And I'm like, oh shit, you guys have the most you guys sort of have the most words baked into your expectations, while even people like me are sort of still trying to catch up because, like you said, sort of the speed of a public conversation that none of us are sort of have any control over, right, has just sort of rocketed ahead of us. And there are people we meet now who are coming in with words that don't line up with what you guys know. And I feel like if we step back from the AI of it all, from the data ownership of it all, if we step out from that, certainly I think something that is frustrating to many of our listeners, no matter where what they think about generative AI advancements, is this is really real. I think for a lot of us, right, is we are all trying to talk about something. We have all turned into the 3 blind mice and the elephant, and we cannot the elephant just keeps walking and we can't pin down where we can't pin down where its antlers are, where it's antlers. Did I say antlers? I meant tusks. We can't pin down the tusks. We can't pin down the trunk. It's and all this is happening while we're being told, while the industry's in crisis, while there's a contraction going on, while we're all trying to keep our jobs. And I think this is just definitely like a big, heavy emotional toll that, I think if you tuned into a game AI podcast expecting to hear about technical definitions about AI or how we construct smarter games, I don't think you were expecting to hear about that. So, dear listeners, thank you for letting me, I guess, get that one out. But I think have you guys, here's where I can off ramp this into a question. Have you guys, you both have had these, these nice careers in game, these long careers in games. Have you ever felt in a moment like this before, right? Where you had knowledge about something but the conversation was moving so fast and it was difficult to pin down. Have you ever felt like this in a moment before, or is this fresh for you guys, would you say?
Certainly there's stuff that becomes obsolete as you go forward. Yes. I mean, some of the, I'm just trying to think of an example. I mean, in the early, anyone who's old enough to remember far pointers, near and far pointers in C++, that's an example, right? Where we had old segmented memory architectures and things like that. So certainly there's ancient knowledge that is less relevant. But in terms of this absolute, okay, this term that I have been using my entire career has now been scooped up and taken for this other thing, that has not happened to me in my career ever.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, this is the frothiest I've ever seen anything. I mean, we're talking about, multi-trillion dollars of capital investment at this point. This whole thing is at a new level of crazy. You maybe play the same game that I do, Rez, given the proximity location-wise. I try and work out how bad the bubbles are by counting the billboards driving down to SFO. And yeah. Crypto was pretty bad. Crypto was, but I think for me, this is definitely you could see it in crypto. You could see this kind of thing where a piece of technology had been kind of captured by capital and turned into this thing, but it wasn't my lawn they were on.
Yeah.
And this time around, it's my lawn. And I think that's the thing for me is get the hell off my lawn.
Yeah. The drifting to another question, as I have referred on this podcast constantly that generative AI, again, my blanket term, perhaps transformer-based AI is what I should be using. I don't know. The term I'm clinging on to for dear life to right now is it's a black hole, and it threatens to spiral all conversation. But because video game AI is so much cooler, I am going to attempt some escape velocity from it, because there is still cool new stuff happening in the space, right? There are all these really interesting games and really interesting potentials for what traditional game AI and what we think of it can be used for. So it's sort of now that we've wandered through the chaos a bit, how do each of you, let's say that you're talking to someone who's played video games but is not very familiar with the art of game development, how do you explain what game AI is to them? And let's just assume for a moment this person's in super good faith, isn't assuming anything about Gen AI or whatever. They're genuinely curious. What do you explain your kind of AI is to a newcomer, I guess? What's that definition?
I mean, it depends on the game. Every game is different, yes. But usually if they're asking me, they're probably asking about The Sims. That's the thing that I'm probably most famous for. So I usually, if I'm relating it to someone who's a complete layperson, I usually relate it to, actual human desire. For example, if you're hungry, you're going to go find something to eat, and you're going to understand what around your house is there to eat. However, there are other things that are vying for your attention. We have all sat there, been super into a video game or something like that, been hungry and been but I'm just going to finish this cutscene, or I'm just going to finish this thing, or one more turn, and for civilization or whatever, right? You're playing Baldur's Gate 3, and it's oh, it's 4 a.m. It's time to go to sleep. It was time to go to sleep 4 hours ago. And so it's those things, those priorities of desire are all feeding off of each other. The other example I use is, and this is specific to a technique called utility theory, is if you think about something like economics, you can have, $5 versus $5 have a similar utility, but not always. If you compare, say, if I have 200 hours in Baldur's Gate 3 and it took me, $60 or whatever it was at launch, versus I'm going to go see a movie for an hour and a half and that was $15. Like, they don't always line up exactly. So it's the way to measure the things that are sort of incomparable. And that's usually where I go when I talk about, like, well, what is actually happening? Well, it's a mathematical probability structure. That's really what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably take a bit of a more lifted kind of view on it, which is like, when you think about graphics and that is how you see the world. You think about physics and that is how things interact. You interact with the world or the world interacts with itself. And then AI is how the world interacts back at you in games.
Mm-hmm. That I love that definition because it's sort of about, it's also about how, like, if we're talking about how in a board game, right, the board game sometimes, it's funny if I was about to say board games have no AI and then I was like, wait a minute, no, we have a whole genre of single player board games where you can now use dice rolls to create the behaviors that come back at you. So that's not even true anymore. But it's sort of like the field that, like, has sort of been, like, drowned aside a bit in favor of what we're talking about is a field of getting computers to sort of talk back to players in a sense, right? To establish rules, and very complex rules with techniques to create that sensation of feeling like I'm engaging with the system and the system's talking back at me. I guess I'm thinking now about a Blue Sky post I made in response to a New York Times article about AI and how video game companies are using AI, and it sort of said something to the effect of, this New York Times article said something to the effect of, like, oh, of course video games would use AI, be the first to use AI. They've been using it since Pac-Man in the 1980s, and I, like, just, my head just exploded. I was taking the tea home when I read it, and I was like, those don't mean the same thing. And people on Blue Sky shared my view, and that was sort of surprising to see overnight. And I think
the first thing that I ask my students in my game AI class is, what is game AI?
Yeah.
That's the very first question I ask. And then we have a conversation about it. And they usually say something like NPC behavior. And then they say, the computer is controlling something. And so I give examples of, like, okay, well, I have a character here and I have a camera here. And so a common thing that you have to do is, as the character moves, the camera has to sort of intelligently move around.
Yeah.
Is that AI? Right? Or if it's all NPCs, cool. I have an NPC that's running a looping animation of fixing a wagon wheel. Is that AI? Yeah. It's just a looping animation. And so even in sort of traditional AI, I don't know that we have an actual definition. It's the definition that I said a long time ago that Luke quoted, which was, if it's an understood problem, it's computer science, it's an algorithm. If it's not an understood problem, then it's AI.
Yeah.
But at the same, and I think, that makes it such a woolly thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm very reluctant to do right now is back away from using, there is a world where you're back away from using AI. You say, this is procedural content, this is that. But I don't want to cede that ground. Like, they don't get to dictate what AI means.
Yeah. And thank you for tolerating the rambling that I have to do on this podcast to sometimes build questions and comments. But the thing I was building towards was, like, the two definitions you guys gave, are such about, like, creating a system that, like you said, sort of talks back to the player, and generative AI as a, like, it's strange that even though, like, when a chatbot is chatting back to you, it just isn't the same thing. If I even think about, if you implement, there are some games out there, that are using LLMs right now, right? Like, these games are like, oh, you can supposedly talk with the NPC and navigate the problem through the NPC. And something I think is interesting is that there is a distinction between even that system, that most, like, gamified version of that system, of taking, like, an OpenAI API call and just having that in your game and having a beautiful model, that like 3D model that someone else sculpted and put all this work into, and now there's a chatbot spitting out to it, is that still doesn't feel like quote unquote talking to the player in the same way. Does that make sense to you? And what do you think you would make the differences there? Like, right? Like, what do you think would be the difference between that kind of interaction versus the other kind of simulated interaction we're talking about? That question seemed way simpler when I started asking it. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's a really good question, though. I know, Rez, you mentioned kind of hooking out NPCs up to LLMs. I'm actually on record in a variety of places as saying that's a terrible idea, and I think you and I will probably get into it next time we cross paths. But
we can get into it now. But no, please answer.
a lot of it for me is about like two things. One is kind of intentionality, and when we're talking about LLMs, we're talking about something that legally or illegally, and unfortunately it looks like it's probably going to get ruled as fair use in the US, but they've sucked up the internet. Yeah. The ethics of that are a different conversation than the legality of it. But because they've sucked up everything, there is a deep lack of intentionality, and the intention and the authorial direction has kind of been fully abdicated. So that feels problematic, and you can kind of reinterpret it with fine-tuning and blah, 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 blah. But I always kind of fall back on Sid Meier's definition of a game, which is a really just succinct one. A game is a series of interesting choices. Mm-hmm. And I think that it stands as a counterpoint to the kind of what LLMs and the generative tech kind of empowers, which is more choices, not necessarily interesting choices, and it kind of speaks to the extent to which games and media more generally is about curation. It's about that directorial and authorial control, and it's about what's not in there as much as it is what is. So throwing in a whole bunch of more, the NVIDIA, I've forgotten the name of the thing, but it's the one that looks a bit like Deus Ex.
The Cyberpunk demo, the definitely not meant to be Cyberpunk 2077 demo.
I thought it was supposed to be Deus Ex, but either way.
Blade Runner, whatever, take your pick, one of those sci-fi dystopias.
Actually, there's one that's set in a neon ramen bar and one that's set in like a cyber renaissance hotel. They're actually covering both boxes. But you've got the cyber renaissance hotel. You've got to like get up to the CEO's suite or something, and you can walk up and you can try and blag your way past the receptionist, or you could talk to the co-founder of the something. And as a tech demo, it's cool. But what you've really done is taken like a traditional branching narrative dialogue options and obfuscated it by making it, hey, you can pick anything. There are a few right ones, and we're not going to tell you what they are, but you could just have a chat with this person, and like, that just feels like it's a great tech demo to showcase. As a game mechanic, it's going to be short-term, like, it's novel, then it's frustrating, then it's the thing that makes me quit, because I'm not being led by the nose to where I need to be. And I'm not a secret agent. I can't blag my way past, frankly, anybody. So, more isn't better. I've the other example of this, and I know I'm off on a rant. I'll give you a chance to speak in a second, Russ. I promise. But Riccatello, one of his last interviews at Unity, he was like, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if you could play FIFA and you could wander around the stadium and you could talk to the fans and they could come and play football?" No, it really wouldn't be, because like, JR needs to go and join a five-a-side league is what actually needs to happen there. Like, go make some friends, my guy. Like
JR, go build your own Ted Lasso experience. Go live your own Ted Lasso life.
But you're there to have the experience of like elite playing football if you've got the license with the real players, not Joe Schmo from the stands. Like, that's not what you literally could go down the pub and join your local. Probably not five-a-side because we're all in America, but you get my point. Like, that's not interesting, and that's not what those games are about.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I agree largely, but I think we differ in a couple of places. However, I'll start by saying that I fully agree that what we have is not something that's going to give you depth. We have something that's going to give you an overwhelming amount of breadth. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing in all places. I think the part where we maybe disagree is that I do think that there is some breadth. Like breadth can be good in some places. I don't necessarily need to go and talk to a random Skyrim NPC or a random person in the box and say, oh, here, tell me about your life story. I'd love to hear about your dog and all that kind of stuff. What I would like is, I don't want to hear the same 5 pieces of dialogue every time. So that's one way where breadth can matter.
Yeah.
The thing is, and you see this everywhere, freaking Notepad has like AI in it for some reason. And it's like, what are we doing? So putting it everywhere is not the right choice. They're just firing this shit gun and seeing what sticks. That's what's happening. And I can't wait for that to not be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Here's the other insidious thing is, so you say, AI driven NPCs. I mean, that exists, right? We have like Replica and we have these other sort of outside of games things where you're trying to create these AI companions. And there's something real dangerous about that, right? Like, and it's already caused some bad things, which I probably won't mention on your podcast, but I think people know what I'm talking about.
There's lawsuits against character AI because some of their users have died by self-harm after interacting with. There's the lawsuits against them. I'm going to name them because I sort of want our users to, it's not defined yet. AI psychosis is not a like medical term yet, but the pattern of behavior for some people after extensive AI use is certainly like tied to the phenomenon you're talking about. That's the word that sort of popped out for it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff. So, it's not studied and there's no guardrails. This is sort of the worst time for AI right now because there's no guardrails anywhere.
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about what Grok has been doing for such a long time? And that is basically a very bad sort of generator of very horrific things? No. I mean, come on, like, how has that been allowed to continue to exist in that form, right?
Yeah.
What are we doing as a species? That's my question. What the fuck are we doing? And
continue, yeah.
Yeah, so that's that's the issue. Getting back to the fun stuff, which is the game stuff. I do think that there's some breadth that does make sense here. I do think that we need to be careful. I also think there's this psychological thing that that as soon as somebody realizes it's an AI, they want to screw with it. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I see the Waymo self-driving cars everywhere, and people try and screw with it, and they they try and mess with it. Every time I see any kind of stream of a game that has an AI character, all they do is say, well, let's give it an existential crisis and all this other stuff. All that said, there's a game that I played called Suck Up, which is this game where you are a vampire, and one of the tropes of a vampire is you have to be invited in. And similar to what Luke was describing from the NVIDIA demo, the whole point is you go from house to house and invite them in. And I actually would love to see a talk of what they actually did and how they made it all work, just to see, what did they do? I'm sure they're generating some XML thing on the background that then is, the player comes in dressed as a certain thing, and so that changes the sort of like hidden prompt that you see. But you just speak to your microphone. It then does a voice to text, sends that to the LLM with whatever meta prompt is there, and then they may or may not let you in. I played it in good faith just because I wanted to see what it was, so I played it as a person trying to play it, and I never ran into any walls. It never did anything particularly wonky. And it was an interesting and fun experience. That said, I was not playing it like a QA person. I was not trying to break it. And that's the other side of this is like, so many times we go to the place like the AI Summit or whatever, and it's like, why aren't you using more LLMs in games? This was before the generative AI stuff. And we're like, because QA will hate you. We have to be able to do that, right? We have to be able to actually check the branches. It's one of the nice things about a branching narrative. You can just flood fill that narrative and make sure that everything actually works.
Yeah.
So.
But to your point, and this is a little bit where, as much as I often come across as a hater, just because I have a lot of fun as a hater, I want to decouple the algorithm from the business and the hype. Because I think that I genuinely believe that there are good guardrailed That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Like ways of harnessing these technologies that are about pushing the boundaries of what games can be. And that vampire thing, I've not seen it. Sounds cool, and it sounds like the kind of thing where like the game mechanic is built around that capability, and that is interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, they're not just sending the calls off to Anthropic or OpenAI, because that'll get costly real quick. But what as math can these add to the experience is the interesting question. The bigger conversation and the bigger societal issues are not letting us address.
Yeah. I will, for listeners, I will put a link to Suck Up in the show notes so you can look at it for yourself. I've glanced it over on Steam over here, and like the reviews are really like there's something going on here in terms of like whatever their relationship with their audience is. But anyway, back on topic. You've both brought up something interesting there, which is like guardrails, safety, and things that if I was ever talking about AI in games before, the idea of safety and guardrails to me before would have just been like, we need to make sure our system doesn't accidentally generate sexual imagery or vile imagery outside of our context. Rez on The Sims, I think that was a space you guys and your players were constantly in, sort of like, and you were kind of like deliberately locking horns to push those things to the boundaries for each other. Something that like has occurred I have never thought before that that video game I would need guardrails to be considered. And an interesting thing I was thinking about is that something I learned in the last few months is that it is actually the idea of like AI safety, not just as like, oh, we're going to make Skynet, but AI safety in regards to humans over anthropomorphizing on AI and developing emotional attachments with a thing is actually older than the modern AI psychosis. I've a couple podcasts I listened to dove into, like how some of the first people who interacted with Eliza just grew extremely emotionally attached to the point that, the people working on were like, what the hell? Like, we didn't expect, like, like sort of the argument that was put forth was we spent so much time worrying about the Turing test, right? Like, which is this marker of, can you fool a human? And instead, the actual thing we should have been studying was what are the thresholds that like trigger unhealthy psychological responses in humans? And that blew my mind because I'd never thought of it before. As a science fiction lover, I too was also just worried about the line between between alive and not alive. I guess, like, is there anywhere for you guys have experienced an AI before in the field? Have you ever had to like witness that before? Like, has there ever been a point in your history of your careers where you sort of had to look at the thing you were making and go, oh, we actually do have to do a safety check on this, I guess? Like, what is like the history in your careers of like safety checks and AI technology been, if it's been there at all? Maybe this is completely wrong. Also, I just realized it's right here in front of me, Luke. The AI service that Suck Up is hooked up to is ChatGPT with OpenAI, so those calls are probably very expensive.
Good luck.
Probably not going to last for long.
Anyway, back to the question, which is, have you guys ever had to look at that safety conversation before? Like, is this new? Is this old for you guys? What is your experience there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, on The Sims for sure. In different ways.
Yeah.
One of the big ones, and this isn't safety, but it's ESRB, right? So depending on what country we're shipping to. So one of the mandates on The Sims is we're very open with like LGBTQ content. However, it cannot exist unless the player initiates it.
Yeah.
So you will never have two gay Sims, for example, unless the player initiates it. And that is for ESRB reasons. For there are other countries that are like absolutely not, you're rated M if that's a thing, or banned or whatever. And so we've had to do that. And I've certainly gotten critical A-level bugs. One of my favorite A-level bugs was two monks holding hands on a park bench. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And so, we go back and we solve those issues. So that's one example. Honestly, so The Sims is this weird space. You go into it and you're making this game, and we had this event where we'd bring these Sims players. I don't know if you've ever been to the EA campus, but there's this regulation size like NBA sort of basketball like arena, whatever you call them. And so they put all those away and they put things down. They put a bunch of computers in there, brought a bunch of people over there, and I sort of snuck into this thing as a developer, just watching people go and listening to their stories. And you get these stories that are like, my father died very suddenly, and so I put him in the game so that he can live again, and it helped me move on. So there's a healthy version of this.
Yeah.
It's not like they're like attached to this, but it helped them move on. My grandfather's one of the most important people in my life, and when he died, I created a little farm simulation. He was a farmer for 10 years after he retired from the U.S. Agriculture Group. And I just created this little dumb simulation that has him moving around. And I played it like at Christmas on the big TV and stuff. And it's just one of those, it's like it helps, those little things can kind of help you move on. So there's an aspect of this that can help. And I don't know where that line is. And we never tried to mess with where that line is because we never, at least we didn't directly see it being, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's crossed all over the place in The Sims, but it never got to us that being crossed, right? Beyond just, there's video game addiction. That's a real thing, all that kind of stuff. But so, yes, I mean, we played around with it, but not to the extent of this, where people are like marrying generative AI systems and things like that. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that I just feel like I'm banging the same drum a lot here, but like there used to be like societal lines that didn't get crossed. I feel like nobody would ever have actively, and I'm kind of projecting, I wasn't there obviously, but nobody would have ever actively suggested that The Sims could be used in this way from the corporate side. And then you've got startups today that are like, memorialize your loved ones, record video of them and they bring them back to life and they'll live forever in the machine. My mom died back end of 24 at a point where these systems did exist. And like the grief pull to explore that was there. Mm-hmm. But then kind of like just seeing how much it's like, letting Sam Altman desecrate a corpse really is kind of, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But I mean, it's hard, but I think the where the line used to be was nobody was trying to actually make a buck off it. And now there are just no limits on what we're prepared to make a buck off, including cancer patients and wars and name a thing. We can bet on prediction markets, not betting apparently. But like, also the other thing, like I've never worked in that kind of an environment because my struggle has always been getting people to believe that any of this could actually do anything. I didn't have a platform like The Sims baked and ready to go. So it was never, can we go too far in any of my work? It was always, could we take one step, please, Jesus? So, I mean, the game's just changed so dramatically on all of this. But, I mean, one thing that I've heard a few people say is the upside for in the trust and safety space. When you think about what that moderation looks like, if you work in trust and safety, there is a pretty good chance that you are kind of, your employment contract is you get PTSD from staring at this stuff. Like, I don't know if they actually write that into the terms or not, but like, that's what, so that anywhere that we can automate stuff like that is also meaningfully helping.
Yeah.
But again, how do you find the line? And the people who've, my sense, and maybe this is me giving myself a pedestal in this case, but like the people who've been here for 10, 20 years are interested in finding the line and staying the right side of it. And, there's a lot of folks, the folks who are more the kind of new to the space folks don't care where the line is, and they just want number to go up.
Yeah. Let's shifting conversation about where does quote unquote AI belong in games. There's a very there's a very big part of the AI and games conversation that I am immediately going to shoot past, which is the argument about whether AI can quote unquote speed up game development. I have written, for those of you listening, I encourage you to go on gamedeveloper.com, look up a few stories under my byline about what is slowing down game development. I encourage you to look at that and to see what the conversations I've had with some of folks in the field, with some of our other readers about that. But to step back up a level about whether or not it speeds it up or slows it down, whatever, the idea of AI tools for whether it's whether it's visual, text, audio, or code in games is certainly in the mix now. And I think I can sort of like at the high level go, as two people who've been working for game AI in a while, have you ever in the past like sort of looked at the idea of AI tools neutral, not generative, not anything, as things that could be used to help developers make cool things? And like what if you have and if you have, like, what was kind of what goals were you trying to hit when you were exploring them, I guess? Like the idea of these kind of tools for, like I said, visuals, visuals, audio, code, like what I guess, like what was this like earlier in your career, I guess, before we were told you could just AI all the art in your game or whatever?
I mean, I've probably got to be a little bit careful what I say here, but
sure, yeah, your former employer definitely not having anything like I might have something to say if you let too much go, but
yeah. So I founded Zynga's AI R&D team in 2019, and we did build game tech and we shipped a game. But we also, and I've talked about this at other places, so I've disclosed it while I was an employee, so it's probably fine. We spent a lot of time working on big tent AI assistive technology for game teams and for other teams across the business. So, this is something that has been a huge part of my career. Like it's what we did. It is, procedural content level design tools, procedural advertising tools, optimization tools for figuring out what was working, what wasn't working. Tooling like that was, and one of the upsides, one of the very, very few upsides of the current moment is that people are more willing to believe that these things can do stuff. We would show up to a game team and I would kind of articulate like, hey, we could build you a tool that could do this. Yeah. Our level designers are special little snowflakes, and I'm like, my guy, it's a match 3. Come on, like, it's a nice match 3, but like, it's a puzzle game. Like, it's not, this is not highbrow art. I'm pretty sure that we could help you, and we actually were able to. And I think it's okay as long as I don't tell you which match 3. The point being, though, that like those conversations were uphill battles, and when I said earlier, like, it was always having to convince people that the thing was even possible, like the thing that an algorithm could help them, and the tone shift in that has been stark. Everybody wants AI. Okay, not everybody wants AI, but anybody in a position of game leadership at least feels that they should be able to tick the box that says, we have AI. And that's, to my mind, that's really opened up doors where, I'm snarky about executives all day, every day, and it's going to bite me in the ass, probably already has. But, like, it's created a world where, like, they say they want AI, and we're like, yes, we will give you AI. And like, you can just go build some of the old stuff and just go, yeah, it's AI. Of course it's AI. Like, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. Malicious compliance, I think it might fall under the category of.
Yeah. There's definitely, I want to give Rez a chance to go, but there's definitely an interesting dynamic about, like, somewhere in there, and I wrote about this when the CEO of Larian, Sven Vink, made his comments about, like, how they quote-unquote use AI for, like, pre-concepting or whatever, where, like, everyone, I think, to one degree or another, feels pressure about when someone comes in and tells them what tools they should be using to do their jobs, and I think abstractly, like, when you're like, I just want to help you do your thing better, you is too often a political battle about like, what is a person who does not do my job, what authority are they trying to give me about how to make my life better or worse, is hanging over that. And it's certainly, I think I see what you're saying about how, like, before, if the tension was in one direction, now it's in another direction. And thankfully, at least, you're not the person coming up and saying, like, let me tell you how I'm going to help replace your job. It's no, let me make a algorithmic tool for you. And almost like the with the Overton window moving, now you're the one coming up with the helpful thing instead of the I'm here to steal your job thing, or the thing with the I'm here to steal your job overtones, because can it actually directly steal a job? Still, but my magic 8 ball says still unknown. The Res, but yeah, Res, in terms of like AI tools for people making games, did you ever have any experience with this in your career? Like, have you ever dealt with your students? Have your students ever tried cooking up something like this? Actually, I really want to, if your students have, I want to hear about it, weirdly.
Yeah, I mean, I have a class called Procedural Content Generation that I teach and that I built. It is not generative AI. It is traditional. It's like using noise functions, using cellular automata, using grammars. Like it's those sort of classic things of how do I build stuff using this, and they eat it up and they love it. In industry, I've had a similar uphill battle in terms. I mean, sometimes just getting a tool. Yeah. And as soon as we had something called the Game State Inspector, and it was exactly what it sounds like. It's just look at variables and things in the game. It's, look at that. And God, that was an uphill battle. It's like, you people have made a game before, right? We need something. And that's not even an AI tool. That's just a tool.
Yeah.
And, what they did is they took, his name is Charles Gast, and they said, okay, I think they gave him 2 weeks or something, and said, here, build something in a couple of weeks. And he just sort of closed in, built a thing in 2 weeks, and then said, oh, wow, this is amazing. And then it's like, oh, we're going to give you, 6 months or however long it was to really build it out. So I think something like that is the key, is like, no, let me show you what this can do. Because right now, so you said, oh, this isn't going to replace you. Well, the narrative is that it kind of is going to replace you. Yeah. Because we're seeing it everywhere.
Certainly, so that's what some people are. That's what, if I believe that was it was either Business Insider or Financial Times had that story about, unfortunately, EA and their belief about AI saving money at EA by replacing jobs. That's certainly an argument being made. Is definitely true. I don't want to shortchange that.
Yeah. And so there is a separate uphill battle because of that, right? Yeah. Because you have to prove to me this is not what this is. And so there's a company, which I'm probably not allowed to say, that made an internal, basically said an internal thing of like, we're not using it to replace anybody, we're using it to uplift people. So things like, for example, Copilot's Code Complete and things like that, right? Like, that's not replacing me. That's just making copy and paste less shitty, right? That's helping to eliminate some of those errors. And in terms of, does it accelerate my development? Yeah. Could it replace me? No. I vibe code Tetris as an example to my students, and it does not go well. Yeah. 2 of the things that I build compile at all. And of the things that compile, it starts doing weird stuff because we look at the code and it's like, let's just keep allocate strings everywhere. This will be fun. And it's like, okay, this isn't going to work in any game anywhere. But also in 30 seconds, I built there's a tabletop RPG I play called Savage Worlds, which has a weird dice rolling mechanic. Yeah. And it's like, I built something that shows me the probability of various different types of dice rolls in 30 seconds because I told Claude to build me a simple web app that does the thing. And it just did. So, like, does it accelerate me? It can, but you have to be careful, man. And part of the problem is I don't think anyone knows really how this is going to help us. Luke is possibly the exception here because he's built the last, several years in pushing these types of tools. But I think for most of us, we are still trying to figure out, well, how can this help us? Where is it a help? Where is it a hindrance? Where is it going to generate code that is unusable and I'm just having to rewrite it or generate bugs that I'm not catching versus this stupid template error that I had a couple of weeks ago? I'm like, what is going on? Claude, what's going on? Oh, it's just this. Oh, okay. It's some weird C++ism or whatever, right? It's like, we're still finding where that is. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's been my experience with it.
Yeah. It's I think what I've enjoyed, like I said, what I've enjoyed digging up is like when we talk about I don't know, this sort of I'm repeating what I said a little bit before, but like when if we skip past, if we're not arguing about whether any given tool, AI or otherwise, is going to speed up our work, air quotes, then what we are talking about is a conversation about introducing tools to people to help them achieve things with their game, whether it's you're not making it fast enough, we need you to make it faster to save money, or you could be making something better if you use this tool. Tool adoption alone, without even talking about AI, almost like tool adoption alone in the workplace generally is like not just a matter of you can definitively prove this is the best thing for the task. It is political by nature, organization, like whose KPIs are getting returned. It's who is is the tool maker themselves benefiting, like everyone building their code stacks on, as I mentioned, this Suck It Up game, building their hookup to OpenAI. Like, cool, now their entire game is based on OpenAI. They better hope that company's still around in 48 months or whatever. Like, this is almost something I think well-intentioned people can lose sight of when you're trying to talk about. We talked about like the 5 conversations earlier, right? Like I've had some conversations, funny enough, I'm wearing a GodotCon shirt. I had a conversation with someone at GodotCon about they were a programmer sort of frustrated about how angry everyone was at the business end of the AI conversation. They felt like it was all being taken out on the programmers, and I felt like I was having a hard time enunciating how you sort of can't just act like there is a programming view of the tools that lets it easy to say, well, this is arbitrarily better than this. Even when you've got the best evidence in the world, you're walking into a conversation that's so much broader than that. And that's before we even get to AI, which I think is actually surprisingly, like, I hadn't even been thinking about that per se when I asked you guys about that. So I think that was actually like a really interesting, like, both your guys' experience working with other people to help them learn how to use your technology is actually like surprisingly affecting. To close it out here, what's funny is early on I said I didn't want this to be a generative AI podcast, but it's a black hole. I've been sucked in. I was watching the new Star Wars Vision show last night that opens with a ship getting sucked into a black hole and breaking out, and you know what? Those assholes did it better than I did. So, but you know what? I would like to wind down with at the beginning I asked about AI characters or entities and things that you enjoyed in games. Are there any right now in the world of games using, and we'll go to AI technology broadly, right? Like there's the creative assemblies back at it with Alien Isolation 2. There is still a lot of cool stuff happening in video game AI without all this other stuff going on. Is there anything out there that you've either played or been talking to people lately, any game, anywhere, as long as you're allowed to talk about it, I guess, probably there's some stuff under NDA, but is there anything you're really excited about out there in the world of playable video game AI that has been buried by this conversation about, these other tools, I guess? Is there anything that's made you really happy recently on that front?
I mean, you mentioned Alien Isolation 2. That was actually going to be the one that I loved the first Alien Isolation. I thought it was great. It's funny because I can tell some of the techniques that they're kind of using to make all that work. And I know some of the people there, of course, just being part of the AI Summit and watching their talks on it. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah. I really love simulations. So, I'm not the biggest fan of just the GTA model in general, but I love the fact that they're trying to do more of even more of a simulation within that world. So anything where there's like a somewhat deeper simulation, you kind of have me right there. Obviously I worked on various simulation games. So those two, I would say those are the games that I'm particularly looking forward to, is anything with any kind of big simulation like that.
That's the first time on this podcast anyone said they are looking forward to the launch of GTA 6 for anything other than understanding how the business of it will shake out. Because now I'm like, oh, you're right. Whatever. and Luke, as former Take-Two, I truly nothing implied here, but only I apparently now we can all go watch the trailer on Netflix whenever that drops. Listen, as I've learned today,
I can't even react when you say the words GTA 6.
That's fine. That's fine. But I actually hadn't, as someone I am not a huge GTA player, and I had sort of forgotten for a moment how much work goes into the simulationism of it. So I want to sort of elevate, whereas they said there for the listeners, if you're also like a GTA agnostic person like me, I don't know, I'll certainly go pop it up to see what the teams pulled off there. Anyway, Luke, for your non-GTA answer, is there anything out there in the world that's got you really excited about like video game AI right now?
So, I mean, I've had a bit more time on my hands lately, and that has allowed me to really dive in on playing some of the kind of classics of game AI. So, spent a bunch of time with Dwarf Fortress, the Kit Fox release. I have to admit, I've done ASCII release so many times. RimWorld is another one that I spent some time, but I think, you know, in terms of forward looking, like I just look at what Kickfox are doing and where they're kind of positioning themselves. Astronauts, I think, has just dropped their 1.0. They've got some really interesting stuff coming out. I mean, you know, you look at the portfolio that they're building out, and that is, if you like the simulationist type stuff, like that's what I'm paying attention to right now.
Yeah, Kitbox has some amazing stuff for sure. They're one of my favorite companies doing this kind of stuff.
We had Tanya on a few months back to talk about the most influential games of all time, and we didn't even get to talk about this cool simulation stuff. So maybe one day we'll reunite and get her, see if, I don't know, her, Tarn, you know, the Adams brothers, those wonderful folks, dig into that end of AI for something a little more pleasant. Rez, Luke, thank you very much for being here today, and I think I'll just say, for the benefit of our listeners too, thank you for your patience and willingness to talk about this thing when I'm sure this must have been like a very frustrating couple of years for you. So I think games, as funny enough, a mutual acquaintance of all of ours, Mark Laura, said, you know, like the games industry is at its best a bunch of people trying to help each other learn how to do things. Rez, you mentioned you're a magician. You know, this isn't an industry of magician secrets. It's an industry of, hey, here's my magician secrets. Here's how I pull rabbits out of hats. And you two have both, I think, been generally seem to have been pushing that in your careers, but it certainly in the time like we're in right now, it's not as easy to do it. So thank you both for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
Thanks again to Rez and Luke for coming on the Game Developer Podcast. I hope that chat was as refreshing for you all as it was for me. With all the conversations we've had about AI in the game industry, it felt good to remember there's still amazing work to be done when it comes to AI, where it fits naturally into gameplay and game development. You know, like it generally used to be. Today's episode was edited by Pierre Landreau, and our theme music is by Mike Meehan. Thank you all for listening.